So now let's discuss about the situation when the Hamiltonian itself is time dependent. So far we have discussed these two pictures, Schrodinger picture and Heisenberg picture. Both of these pictures are equivalent. In one picture you give the time dependence to the states, which is Schrodinger picture, and keep the operator stationary or the Hamiltonian stationary. In another picture, which is the Heisenberg picture, you give the time dependence to the operator and keep the state stationary. Both of these are equivalent way for doing time independent problems, but for time dependent problems some extra complication arises, and let's see what we can do to deal with that. So let's start with the Schrodinger equation, I h bar d dt psi t psi ket equal to h t psi t, where ht, the Hamiltonian itself, has a time dependent into it. It's a time dependent field. You can put a spin in a time dependent magnetic field, or you can put a particle in a box where the box is changing its shape with time, which is actually the case for most problems. Like all problems are somewhat time dependent. Only in almost all problems, only in certain approximation we can consider it as a static problem. It's a matter of time scales. Like if in the rate of change or rate of the dynamics is slow, much slow compared to the experimental time scale, we assume it as a stationary problem. But often that is not true. The rate of change or the Hamiltonian itself is a dynamical object. It changes with time, and then we cannot keep that assumption anymore. And here we'll learn how to deal with that scenario. So let's just recap that what happened when ht is h, which is not time dependent. The psi t is just e to the power minus I h t by h bar psi naught. And if this time difference is infinitesimal, so in other words, looking for what is the time evolution operator which takes me from time t to t plus dt, then I can expand this exponential as e to the power minus I by h bar h t dt and the higher order dt squared term. Now note that there is this composition rule for time evolution, which is an obvious rule. It just tells you the operator which takes you from t naught to t, and the operator which takes you from t to t plus dt, if you write them next to each other, you should get the operator which takes you from t naught to t plus dt. That's how this time evolution rules. It's a common sense, and with the time evolution operator, which is this, is constructed in a way such that it is valid. Now I can write based on that. I can now write the expansion of it, which is an assumption true when t is dt is too small. There is no such assumption here, so I can write this operator ut plus dt to t naught and decompose it into two parts, and for one part I can apply this approximation, linear approximation, another part I can keep it intact. Now this is a useful thing because now the ut itself has a time dependent in a non-trivial way, which is coming from the fact that the ht is time dependent. And so now I can rearrange this equation and write it as ut plus dt t naught minus ut t naught, which is equal to minus I by h bar h t dt ut t naught. We can divide both sides by dt by I h bar, and then that gives me a differential equation. And this differential equation tells me it's a Heisenberg equation, it's a Schrodinger equation look-alike equation, and which tells me that what is the rate of change of the operator time evolution operator itself, which has two non-trivial time dependence. One is coming just from the fact that it is written to the word iht dt or hdt, where the t is just a linear time dependent, and ht itself is a time dependent object in some complicated way. When both of these two are present, this equation 2 gives me the time evolution operator, the time evolution equation for the propagator itself. So I might use this word propagator time to time. It basically means it's an operator which propagates the states from t to t naught. So you will see a more formal definition of that, but since I am used to it, I sometimes just call it a propagator. So this, you can call it a propagator, or you can just call it a time evolution operator if you wish to. Now let's consider various cases and look at the solution of this equation 2. What is the right way to write down the solution of equation 2? For sanity check, let's just look at the trivial case, which is when ht is constant equal to h. When that happens, then you know the solution what it should be, and you can look it from the equation 2 also, that is what you expect. You get what you expect, which is the propagator is u t naught is e to the power minus h t minus t naught by h bar. Now let's go to the next level of complication, which is still easy, is that the situation when the ht is not constant but it always commutes with the Hamiltonian. So that is not so obvious in most of the problem, but some problem it can happen. I'll come to an example in a moment. So at all time t prime, these Hamiltonians commute. So that means you can work in a basis in which ht is diagonal, and in that basis the Hamiltonian will remain diagonal all the time. So that is the main point. And then in that basis I can simply integrate equation 2, and then this will be the correct expression for when I write the solution is u t naught exponential e to the power exponential minus I by h bar t naught to 2 ht prime dt prime. So that's the solution when ht prime commutes with ht all the time. Now what is an you can check also this by differentiating equation 2 and you get back the previous equation 1, and this is a very simple solution. And what is an example? As an example you can consider this. Let's say you have a spin half in a magnetic field, and the magnetic field is oriented in the z direction. So then the Hamiltonian would be h minus bz sz, because it's b dot s, so only the z component is non-zero, so it's bz sz, and the only thing you are doing is changing the magnetic field such that the strength of the magnetic field is changing but the direction is same. Then always the Hamiltonian commutes with sz whatever at any time, and always the Hamiltonian it commutes with another time ht prime. So then you can always use the sz basis as usual and solve this problem simply. So that is the and use the equation 3 for solving this problem, and that is basically the point here. So now let's go to the next level of complication, is that what happens if ht and ht prime doesn't commute. You can think of a very simple example, that you have turned on a magnetic field and the magnetic field is continuously changing its direction. It is coming from some source which is always changing its direction. It's not or it's like some AC field or not which is going always plus minus, but something can more complicated. It can change like one direction, another direction, and one moment x, one moment y, another moment some arbitrary direction. So then clearly that the ht is not commuting with ht prime at all the time. One moment it is bz sz, another moment is bx sx. Like let's keep even if I keep the magnitude same, it is just one moment the Hamiltonian is sx, another y, another moment some complicated combination. So then they don't commute. Then the equation 3 is not so trivial. You cannot write just the equation 3. Because of the reason that this is, so you can think this equation 3 as a summation of ht prime at all the time, and these times don't commute. So you can, it's not a usual summation. It's in a summation you normally expect a plus b is b plus a, but which is this integration should be like that. But if you divide this t naught to t into this infinitesimal time slices, you will see that this ht prime at some other time and ht, they are not interchangeable. So this is not a simple summation, it's a special kind of summation. So we will see what to do about it in two different ways. So the way to think about this is, as I said, it's very simply by slicing the time from t naught to t into many small slices. And we know that the Hamiltonian at each of these time slices doesn't commute with the Hamiltonian another time slices. So here is this decomposition. This is formally sometimes it's called Trotter decomposition. So what do I do? That I take the time t naught to t interval and slice it into other sub intervals like t1, t2, t3, such that if I arrange them by time ordering, it goes from t naught is like less than, is earlier time than t1, t1 is earlier time than t2, and so on. So these are discretizing the time axis, and you make them infinitely many slices such that like the delta t interval is t minus t naught by n naught, which is the number of slices you made, And we can even have these slices uneven length. You don't need it to even length, but let's for simplicity make it even length. And we are interested at the limit when n goes to infinity and delta t goes to 0, such that the n times delta t, that whole time interval, remains finite. So these are infinitely many time slices, and in each of these time slices the Hamiltonian doesn't commute with the Hamiltonian with another time slices. So now how can I write down the evolution operator or the propagator for each of these sub-intervals? I can write, because these sub-intervals are very tiny, I can use the approximation and write 1 minus I by h bar hti times delta t. Now, which is up to order delta t square, equivalent to e to the power minus I h ti delta t by h bar. So now let's build up the finite time interval evolution operator based on these infinitesimal time evolution operators. What do? I will simply use this composition rule. I will apply the time evolution operator in successive time intervals, one after the another. That will be, it will take me some t0 to t1, t1 to t2, and like ti to ti plus 1, and so on till t with this ordering. So this ordering is important because you cannot mess with this ordering. You cannot move things here and there in this ordering because they each don't commute from one ordering to another ordering. So this process is called time ordering, and equation 4 is called a time ordered product. So now I will take the limit delta t going to 0, n going to infinity, such that n delta t finite, and notice that each term in equation 4 is an exponential, but some care is needed to express equation 4 as equation 3, because it's not just a simple sum of operator. So now if I put the exponential forms, I can write this equation 4 formally as this equation 5, which is exponential minus I by h bar t0 to t dt prime ht prime, with a symbol to remind that this is time ordered, which means each of these time interval ordered in a sequence such that the later times comes to the left. So this is called time ordered exponential. It is not strictly a sum, because a sum is not defined that way. It's a time ordered exponential, and this time ordering operator, the task of this time ordering operator, if I give you a arbitrary way, this exponential, this time ordering operator's job is to order the operators in the argument such that it is always time ordered, which means later time comes left and earlier times comes on right. So, and that ordering is disregarding the rules of commutation relations, because this ordering is simply because we want these things to be time ordered, such that so that is the first rule to begin with. And for that, like when I move one operator from left to right in order to make it time order, we don't use the commutation relation. Okay. So now let's go to this UTT naught. So notice that UTT naught is well defined because it's well defined at each of these some time infinitesimal time interval. So it must be well defined in the whole time interval as long as you use this time ordered notation. Now this is a very simple way of working out this equation, and there is a more rigorous way of reaching to this equation 5 to make more sense of this, and it even use it for practical purpose. Like there is a so we will now show you a more practical way of arriving at equation 5. This is a conceptual way of arriving equation 5. Both are like equally good, but the later way will be more useful, and you will use it again and again in time dependent perturbation theory. So the alternate approach to solve equation 2 is by integrating equation 2 as follows. So we start with equation 2 and integrate both sides using this dt prime, and notice that this left hand side, when we do the integration, it becomes utt naught minus ut naught t naught. This is just 1 because it is this means you have not done any evolution. So if I write this and then use this equation, these two equations, I can write utt naught. I can get an expression of utt naught as 1 minus I by h bar t naught to t dt prime ht prime ut prime t naught. So this is an expression of utt naught in terms of h, this ht prime, and a time evolution operator which takes it to from t naught to t prime, where t prime is a time which is less than t, less than or equal to t. So this is an equation which is a self-consistent form. Its left hand side and right hand side both has a time evolution operator. So how will you solve this equation? You use a power series solution to do this. So here you have a time evolution which takes you from t0 to t. For to know this time evolution from t0 to t, you need to know a time evolution from t0 to t prime, where t prime is less than equal to t. So that is needed. So how do I know this part, this term? So it turns out I can write similarly u t prime t naught. So it is just the equation which is time translation invariant. So I can write an equation of t prime t naught just exactly the same way, which is 1 minus I by h, but there is nothing in this which doesn't allow. So I can just say, okay, I will do t naught to t prime. So if I do that, it becomes t naught to t prime, where I have the same form of equation, except to know t naught to t prime, you have to know it from t naught to t double prime, where t double prime is less equal to t prime. So now you can keep doing this process again and again. So if you do that, you keep getting, so for example in this you have this t double prime, and then when you plug this in, you have this 2h. One you have h t prime, another you have h double t prime, which will come from here. So if you keep doing this process again and again, you will generate this infinite power series in many powers of Hamiltonian. So u t t naught will become 1 minus I by h bar t naught to 2 dt prime h t prime, then minus I by h bar square t naught to t dt prime, and so on. Now this is a power series, but this is not a very well defined, it's not a converging power series in the sense, because there is no guarantee that, because first of all you notice that the h bar is in denominator. So it's a small thing. Okay, h bar is not it's not a power series in h bar. I don't assume this h bar as a small parameter, but it's a growing series in that sense. Okay, so we can assume h bar to be equal to 1 in some special natural units, so that will not bother us. But there is no small parameter in this power series, it's just a power series form. It's not a series expansion in the sense we used before. You need the whole series basically for this. So now let's go to equation 6. So this equation 6, and let's try to evaluate. So if I try to evaluate the equation 6, you see there is a complication that each integration has a different range, like t naught to t and t naught to t prime and so on. So that is actually, it is like a form of nested integral, because in order to know dt prime, you have to evaluate the dt prime, which comes as a which is upper limit of these, and then to know, similarly here, in order to know that, you have to know that, like t1, you have to know it up to the integrand up to t2. To know t2, you have to know the integrand up to t3. So that is like a nested integrals, and they are very hard to usually deal with. So there is a simplification I can do, and that simplification is by simply looking at the point that this ht and ht double prime is an operator which you want to so you want to evaluate this object. Now you can evaluate it in the whole space, and the whole space is basically t prime to t double prime, and then you change the limits from t0 to t in both cases. So there is no nested form. So how is this accurate? So basically in this way of doing, you are doubling the operation. So because you are doubling the operation, you are doing an overcounting, and that need to be compensated by a factor of half. So that is basically to deal with the overcounting. And similarly you can show that the nth term of this kind of, in this way of doing, when you change the integrands from nested to just simple integrand, you will do this overcounting by a factor of n prime. So that you can check very simply by doing a few more cases. So now when you do that, you get a very simple expression, and that looks better because now it has some small parameter also in the front, and you get a expression like this, where all the integrals are like t naught to t, t naught to t, t naught to t, like that, and you have instead a factor of 1 by n factorial, and you also have this h ordered in time. So this, you have this time ordered ht1 t2 dt in this form. So now because it's a nested integral, you have this time ordering also. So now that you have obtained this equation 7, notice equation 7 has the form of exponential series expansion. So now I can write it down simply by this form, this equation 5, and that is what we obtained before. But this series is actually called Dyson series. It's a Dyson sum of these time ordered operators, and you will later you will see that it is actually easier to evaluate sometimes. So you won't want to evaluate this whole series, you want to evaluate just the terms of this series. So this way of writing actually helps us to do this, to evaluate these terms of this series. And that will be something we will do practically, because in order to know this solution, you won't be able to do this whole exponential thing all the time. In that case, you will evaluate these terms of this series, and here the expansion of this operator in this series form. Okay. So this is just an alternate approach. So now we will learn another picture, a third picture apart from Schrodinger and Heisenberg picture, and this third picture is called interaction or Dirac picture. So this was also almost invented around the same time, within 1 and 2 years of Heisenberg and Schrodinger picture, and it's a picture exclusive to deal with interacting time dependent systems. So let's say you have so how this picture is different. It's an intermediate thing between the Schrodinger picture and Heisenberg picture, because in this picture both the states and the quantum operators carry time dependence. Not only like in Schrodinger picture only the states carry, in Heisenberg picture only the operator carries, and the other ones are stationary. Here both of them carry some time dependence in a tricky way, and it is especially useful for problems which have a explicit time dependent term in the Hamiltonian. And it is also useful in dealing with change in wave function and observables due to time dependent interactions. So you can, again, all these three pictures are equivalent. You can use it equally well in any scenario, but these are the places where it is particularly useful. So let's say I have a Hamiltonian of this form, as you have seen many times in perturbation theory, which is a H0 form, H0 part, which you know everything about. You know how to solve it. It is a time dependent part, but you know how to solve it very well. So we know the dynamic size H0, and there is a Vt which we want to treat as a small perturbation. But for the time being of this formalism, we don't care it is small or big, but we just know, assume that you can write the Ht as this additive form, H0 plus Vt. So what does the interaction picture say? The interaction picture is basically like the Schrodinger picture in the sense that we remove the time evolution which is coming because of H0. So we like to so the H0 will give a time evolution of the form, that is psi it is u naught inverse psi st, and then we want to, so that is the, I write this S because it's like Schrodinger S. So you use the Hamiltonian which is time independent in the Schrodinger form. So psi it basically gives you the time evolution in a way written that the when I multiply it with the propagator of u naught, then you get rid of the time evolution which is coming from H0. So psi it has the time evolution coming from both H0 and Vt, and I am separating the part which is coming from H0. So when I do that, I get a state which is called psi it, but the state is still time dependent, because even though I have removed the so this is inverse because I am trying to remove that e to the power iht whatever minus iht IH0 st which is coming from the Schrodinger time evolution. I am trying to remove that part, but I still have the time evolution which is due to Vt. So that's why it's an interaction picture. It's called an interaction picture. So let's call it psi it. Now what happens if it is a Heisenberg picture? What is the difference from Heisenberg picture? So the Heisenberg picture will try to remove the entire time evolution. The entire time evolution of the state by multiplying it by u inverse t on Schrodinger picture. So that's the relation between Schrodinger state and Heisenberg state. But the relation between Schrodinger state and interaction state is that I am removing only the time part of the time evolution which is because of H0. And I can do that because it is additive. If it wouldn't be additive, we could have not written in this like this separately. So how will this psi it will evolve in time? To know that, let's take the derivative on both sides and use the definition of psi it. With a little bit of algebra, you can show that it will follow the equation 8. So I ask you to check that. It's a very simple exercise, just a few lines of algebra. You will see that the psi it follows a Schrodinger equation like equation where the state is psi it, IH by ddt psi it, and the Hamiltonian is like Vit psi it, where Vit is something like Hamiltonian and the Vit is given by u naught inverse t vt u naught t. So that gives the dynamics of the state, because now the dynamics of the state is entirely from the v, from the perturbation of the evolved time evolved perturbation, and the part which is removed from the picture is the Schrodinger time evolution. So it's like a Schrodinger equation for psi I t, where the evolution due to h naught t is removed. So that is how we get the interaction picture time evolution. And similarly, we can work out the general. So we have established that the this operator will look like u naught inverse t vt u naught t. But you can work out that a general operator will evolve like that in this interaction picture. The operator will evolve under u naught t, which is like Schrodinger, just the non-interacting part, and the state will evolve with vit, which is the interacting part. So that is the whole thing about, and the vit itself is a operator which is like that. So that is the whole complication, that is the whole picturization of this interaction picture. And you might wonder that what is the point of doing these weird things. The point is just to separate the problems, easy part and the difficult part. So now I have an equation in terms of the difficult part vit, where the easy parts are brushed inside psi it. And similarly, I have now I want to compute an evolution, time evolution, which I deal entirely with the easy part. So now that helps us a lot. We'll see how in dealing with time dependent perturbation theory. So now there is one more important point to be noted, that in the interaction picture you can show, if you take the dAi dt, you can take simply the derivative on both sides. You will see this will give me, this is basically e to the power minus I h naught t. So that derivative will give you an h naught a, and when you take this derivative it will give an a h naught minus a h naught, because of the minus sign in e to the power minus. And then there will be another term which is del at, del ait, del t. So when I group all this together, you will see the time dependent, the time evolution of the operator in interaction picture is just the Heisenberg evolution operator, but with h naught, entirely with h naught. So that is basically reflects the equation in 9. It's the same statement as that, but now we formally recovered the Heisenberg equation of motion. Similarly, you can show very simply, you can write now everything in terms of h naught I instead of h naught s, because actually I wanted to, this is h naught s, and that I can show just simply by writing this down. So that is how the formal way the interaction picture is represented, where the time evolution is given to both the state and the operator. The operator evolves according to the h naught I, under h naught I or the h naught s, or like the, it's like Heisenberg picture, but it evolves with the and the dynamics is governed by the h naught part. And similarly, the state evolves with the like a Schrodinger picture, but the dynamics is governed by a vit, which is the interacting part, and that vit itself is a time dependent operator which evolves according to the h naught. So there is certain advantage of doing this song and dance, and that we'll see when we'll do this, we'll do the perturbation theory. The whole point is to separate the h naught and v, and that is what we have successfully done in this interaction picture. So now, as I said, that interaction picture is useful when you fully understand the h naught, and the v is like a weak probe which is disturbing the system, and you want to look at the response of the system in that. And as we said, the interaction picture with the hiding the time evolution due to the system or the part we understand within the interaction state. And now we can only deal with the unknown part of the system, such that we can deal with the unknown part of the system. It's just separating the easy and difficult part of the problem. So here is a one-page summary of the whole interaction Schrodinger and Heisenberg, Schrodinger and Dirac picture. In Heisenberg picture, the state Ket is constant. The operator evolves like this, or follows this dA dt is equal to AH commutator, and the density matrix is constant. I didn't discuss the density matrix, but density matrix represents the state. So it has a analogous behavior as the state operator, state vector. So now the Schrodinger picture, the state evolves by the simple time evolution operator, e to the minus hst by h bar, and the observable or operator doesn't evolve in time, and the density matrix evolves by, because density matrix is like a state operator, so it evolves like this rho s t to the minus I h s t by h bar, rho s 0 e to the power I h s t by h bar. Now in the Dirac picture or the interaction picture, that the state evolves only under the h naught part. Like here the assumption is the Hamiltonian can be written as a h naught plus v, so the state evolves only because of the h naught, and the operator evolves again only under the h naught, and the operator contains usually the so I made a mistake here. I think this h naught should not be h naught s. So in the Dirac picture, the operator evolves according to the vi, but the vi itself evolves according to h naught s, and that is how one should see it. So fix this typo in your note, and that's how the density matrix will evolve in this Dirac picture. So that's all. That is all I wanted to show in this lecture, which is basically a lecture which is supposed to be delivered at the early section of that course, but I think now it is more relevant, and so we covered a generic time dependent Hamiltonian and generic treatment of time dependent quantum mechanics. That's all.